The crisp air of Xylar whistled past the rocky outcrops as David adjusted his equipment. He checked his geology tools one last time before venturing deeper into the uncharted territory that his maps vaguely sketched. The terrain was rugged, alien, nothing like the familiar landscapes of Earth. "Make sure your comms are on," David reminded himself aloud, the sound of his voice oddly comforting against the silence of the alien planet. As he picked his way through a narrow pass, his scanner beeped, signaling the presence of the rare mineral he'd been tasked to find. He was so engrossed in his work, collecting samples, that he didn't notice the figure watching him from a distance. "You there, human?" a strong voice called out. David spun around to find himself face to face with a tall, imposing figure. The alien skin shimmered in the sunlight, an iridescent blue that contrasted starkly with the red soil of Xylar. "I'm Sheriff Ulissa. You've entered a restricted area," she stated firmly, stepping closer. Her uniform was adorned with symbols of authority, unmistakable even to an outsider. David, taken aback, stammered, I had no idea. I'm just here to collect samples. I mean no harm." Ulissa eyed the equipment slung over David's shoulder with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Collect samples? For what purpose?" "For geological research. I'm a geologist from Earth," David explained, slowly lowering his bag to show he wasn't a threat. "These minerals are crucial for our studies." Ulissa's expression softened slightly. "Earth, you say? I've read about your planet. Very different from Xylar." "Yes, quite different," David chuckled, eager to ease the tension. "May I show you some of the minerals I've found? Perhaps explain my work? I find sharing knowledge tends to build trust." Intrigued, Ulissa nodded. "Very well, but keep your hands where I can see them." As David carefully laid out the colorful array of rocks and minerals, he talked Ulissa through each one. "This is bisonite, similar to basalt but with a finer grain. And this," he picked up a glowing stone, "is unique to your world. It's why I'm here." Ulissa leaned in, her eyes reflecting a newfound respect. "You truly are far from home. What drives a human to come all this way for rocks?" "Not just any rocks, Sheriff," David smiled, his passion for geology evident in his voice. "These rocks tell stories of planets, stars, and the universe. It's not just science, it's history, and every history has its value." The sheriff paused, considering his words. "You speak of your work with such fervor. I find that refreshing." "I'm glad to hear that, Sheriff. Perhaps, you might consider allowing me to continue my research? I assure you, I'll respect the boundaries you set." Ulissa thought for a moment, then nodded. "I will need to verify your claims with your Earth authorities, but I see no harm in learning more myself. After all, understanding is a two-way path." "Thank you, Sheriff Ulissa," David said, relief washing over him. "I look forward to learning from each other." As they walked back towards the boundary of the restricted area, David couldn't help but feel that his mission on Xylar was about to get even more interesting than he had anticipated. David sat in the modest confines of the local enforcement unit, a prefabricated building that served as Sheriff Ulissa's office and the hub for local security on Xylar. The interior was Spartan, with surfaces that gleamed metallic under the harsh lighting. He shifted uncomfortably on the metal chair, trying to discern what would happen next. Sheriff Ulissa entered the room with another figure, a male deputy named Torvin, whose presence was nearly as imposing as hers. "David, this is Deputy Torvin. He'll be verifying your documents and the purpose of your visit," Ulissa introduced. "Nice to meet you, Deputy." David extended his hand, which Torvin stared at briefly before shaking. "Human customs still feel odd," Torvin said with a gruff voice, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. David chuckled. "I guess they might at that. I appreciate your cooperation." Torvin pulled up a chair and began reviewing the electronic documents David had provided. "You've traveled quite a distance. Earth is not a common origin for visitors here. What makes these minerals so important?" David launched into an explanation, his enthusiasm clear. "Each mineral has unique properties that can help us understand not only Earth's geological history but also the conditions on other planets like Xylar. For instance, the luminescent rock I found could indicate geothermal activity below the surface, which is incredibly exciting." Ulissa, who had been listening, chimed in, "And what do you do with that information?" "It helps us build better models of planetary formation and sustainability. This could even aid in your planet's conservation efforts," David replied, hoping to highlight the mutual benefits. Torvin looked up from his tablet, seemingly satisfied. "Your intentions seem genuine, but I must ask, why work alone? Most researchers come in teams." David sighed, a trace of loneliness in his voice. "Funding is tight, And my research isn't mainstream yet. I guess you could say I'm a bit of a lone wolf. Working alone in unfamiliar territory is risky, Yulissa noted, her tone softening. I understand that now, David admitted. I certainly didn't mean to cause any trouble. Perhaps we could assist you, Torvin suggested, looking to Yulissa for approval. It would ensure his safety and give us better oversight. Yulissa nodded slowly. I agree. But, David, you'll need to follow our protocols strictly. No more unauthorized excursions. Of course, Sheriff. I'm grateful for the help, David replied, relieved. Good, Yulissa stood up. Torvin, why don't you start by showing David around? Familiarize him with what we do here. It might help him understand our perspective better. As they toured the facility, David observed the operations of Xylarian law enforcement. Torvin explained their methods for maintaining peace and how they balance enforcement with understanding and respect for the planet's ecosystems. You see, our work is not just about keeping order. It's about respecting Xylar and all its inhabitants, Torvin said as they watched officers working with various alien technologies. I respect that a lot, David responded genuinely. Back on Earth, we often struggle with balancing development and conservation. The day ended with a newfound respect between the three. As they shared a meal in the local eatery, the conversation flowed from scientific discussions to personal stories, bridging the gap between human and Xylarian experiences. Today was enlightening, David admitted as they walked back to the station under the glow of Xylar's twin moons. We're just getting started, Yulissa said with a smile. Let's see what tomorrow brings. David nodded, feeling less like a detainee and more like a part of something collaborative. As they parted ways for the night, he felt optimistic about what his unexpected alliance with Yulissa and Torvin might yield. The next morning, David joined Yulissa and Torvin at the local command center, a hub bustling with activity. He noticed the diversity of the staff, various species working together seamlessly. Torvin introduced David to another deputy, Rael, a humanoid with striking green skin and an amiable demeanor. David, this is Deputy Rael. He's our expert on ecological management, Torvin explained. Nice to meet you, Rael. David extended his hand, which Rael shook with a firm grip. Pleasure's mine, David. Heard you're helping us understand Earth's geology, Rael replied with a curious tilt of his head. That's the plan, David grinned. I'm hoping to learn as much from you as you might from me. Then you'll enjoy today, Yulissa interjected. Rael is taking us to the Western Fields. It's a site of significant ecological importance, and it'll give you a good view of how we manage our natural resources. As they traveled in a rugged terrain vehicle, Rael and Torvin shared stories of their past field experiences, blending humor with lessons learned from managing Xylar's diverse ecosystems. Arriving at the Western Fields, David was struck by the vast expanses of bioluminescent plants that lit up the landscape in a dazzling display of colors. This is incredible, he marveled, stepping out to take a closer look. Rael joined him, explaining, these plants are not just beautiful, they're crucial for the soil's health and help prevent erosion. We've been working to enhance their growth without disrupting the natural balance. David listened intently, comparing it to similar conservation efforts on Earth. We have something similar with our mangrove projects. They protect our shorelines much like your plants here. That's interesting, Rael mused. Cross-planetary conservation strategies could be beneficial. The group spent the day examining various flora and fauna, with David taking samples and notes. Yulissa observed the exchange of ideas, pleased with the collaboration. As the sun began to set, they set up a portable campsite. Sitting around a synthesized heat source, they shared a meal. The conversation shifted from professional to personal, as they discussed their backgrounds. So, David, what made you choose this lonely path of a geologist? Rael asked, handing him a local delicacy. David chuckled, I've always loved the stories that rocks tell about the past. Every new discovery feels like solving a piece of a gigantic puzzle. I can relate to that, Torvin chimed in. My early days in law enforcement felt like putting puzzle pieces together. Every case was a mystery. It's the thrill of the chase, whether it's minerals or culprits, Yulissa added, smiling. The group laughed together, enjoying the camaraderie. David felt a sense of belonging, a stark contrast to his solitary days back on Earth. He shared more about his family and life on Earth, and in return, Yulissa and her deputies shared insights into Xylarian culture and societal norms. As the night deepened, Rael proposed, why don't we make this a regular thing? Cultural exchange days? I'd like that, David said. There's so much we can learn from each other. Yulissa nodded in agreement. It's settled then. Let's aim to make these exchanges as enriching as possible. Returning to the vehicle for the drive back, David felt enriched and excited about the future. This partnership was turning out to be more than just a scientific endeavor. It was a bridge between two worlds, opening paths to mutual understanding and respect. The days on Xylar passed swiftly, each one filled with new learning experiences and shared endeavors between David, Yulissa, Torvin, and Rael. Their routine had settled into a harmonious blend of field research and cultural exchanges. Today, they were gathered in a communal space within the command center, the walls adorned with holographic displays of Xylar's ecosystems. Yulissa cleared her throat, signaling the start of their meeting. David, we've been impressed with your contributions and insights into our conservation efforts. It's time we discuss something more personal, but significant. David looked up, intrigued by Yulissa's tone. Of course, Sheriff. What's on your mind? It's about my physiological cycle, my hot season, Yulissa began, her voice steady but her cheeks tinged with a hint of blue, a sign of Xylarian blush. It's a period of heightened emotional and physical sensations. It can affect my judgments and interactions. David nodded, understanding the delicacy of the topic. Thank you for trusting me with this information. How can we assist during this time? Yulissa appreciated his tact. Mainly, I may require adjustments to my schedule. Certain sensitivities arise. It's temporary but intense. Torvin added, we've all adapted our duties around it before. It's natural for us, but we thought you should know, given how closely we work together. Rael chimed in with a supportive smile, it's a unique aspect of our biology. Just part of life here. David's mind raced with questions, but he chose his words carefully. I'm here to learn and adapt. Let me know what you need from me. Yulissa's expression softened. Thank you, David. That means a lot. The meeting shifted to lighter topics, and soon they were discussing plans for their next field trip. Rael suggested, why not explore the northern caverns? They're not only a geological wonder but also cooler, which might be more comfortable for Yulissa during this time. Sounds perfect, David agreed enthusiastically. I've read about the caverns. The mineral formations are supposed to be spectacular. Yulissa nodded. It's settled then. Let's prepare for a trip in 2 days. As they gathered their materials and notes, David stayed back to speak with Yulissa. If there's anything specific you need, or if you feel overwhelmed, please tell me. I'm here to help, not just with geology. Yulissa met his gaze, her eyes grateful. I will, David. Thank you for being so understanding. 2 days later, the team stood at the entrance of the northern caverns, the air crisp and echoing the sounds of dripping stalactites. David was in his element, explaining the formations to Rael and Torvin as they collected samples. This stalagmite could be over 1,000 years old, David noted, his voice echoing slightly in the vast chamber. Each layer tells a story of this planet's climatic changes. Rael was fascinated, his device scanning the structure. We can analyze these layers to understand our environmental history better. Yulissa watched them, her discomfort eased by the coolness of the cavern and the distraction of their work. She was unusually quiet, prompting David to check in on her. Everything okay? He asked, his concern genuine. Yulissa managed a smile. Yes, just a bit overwhelmed by the sensations. This place helps, though. It's peaceful. I'm glad, David replied, standing a bit closer. You've got a great team here. We all care, not just about the work, but about each other. Yulissa looked around at her team, her heart swelling with appreciation. I do. And I'm thankful for it. And for you, David. As they continued their exploration, the bond between the team deepened, rooted not just in professional respect but in personal care and mutual understanding. The day concluded with a wealth of samples and data, but more importantly, with strengthened friendships and trust, pivotal for the days ahead. After a successful expedition to the northern caverns, the team gathered back at the command center for a debriefing session. David, Yulissa, Torvin, and Rael sat around the holographic table, analyzing the data collected. The mood was light, with occasional laughter breaking through the scientific discussions. So, this layer here, David pointed at the holographic display of a stalagmite cross-section, indicates a major climatic shift about 500 years ago. It could correlate with the folklore you mentioned, Rael. Rael nodded, intrigued. Yes, the great cooling legend. It's fascinating to see our stories potentially backed by science. As the meeting concluded, Torvin turned to the group. Why don't we celebrate tonight? A small dinner at my place? I can cook up something traditional from Xylar. That sounds wonderful, David smiled broadly. I'd love to learn more about Xylarian cuisine. Yulissa, still adjusting to her heightened senses, felt a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. "That's very kind, Torvin. I think a relaxing evening is what we all need." As evening approached, the group met at Torvin's residence, a cozy home with a view of Xylar's luminescent forests. Torvin had prepared a variety of dishes, filling the room with exotic aromas. David was particularly interested in the cooking process. "What's in this one?" he asked, pointing at a steaming pot. "That's Hylar stew, made from root vegetables and spiced meat. It's a winter favorite," Torvin explained. Everyone enjoyed the meal, sharing stories and laughter. As the night drew on, Yulissa and David found themselves alone on the balcony, looking out over the glowing landscape. "I never imagined I'd find such warmth so far from Earth," David confessed, watching the lights dance in the distance. Yulissa turned to him, her eyes reflecting the forest's luminescence. "Nor did I expect to open up so much to someone from another world." The cool night air mixed with their warm conversation. David took a deep breath, then spoke hesitantly. "Yulissa, there's something I've been wanting to ask you. If it's too much, just tell me." Curiosity piqued, Yulissa encouraged him, "Go on. It's about your hot season. I know it's a sensitive topic, but I want to understand what you experience. Not just scientifically, but personally." Yulissa considered his words, then nodded slowly. "It's like being aware of every sound, every color, every feeling intensified. It's overwhelming but also vividly beautiful." David listened intently, his gaze never leaving hers. "That sounds both incredible and daunting." "It is," she admitted. "But sharing it with someone who tries to understand, who cares. It makes it easier." Their eyes locked, and a silent understanding passed between them. Slowly, David reached out, his hand brushing hers. The touch was tentative at first, but as Yulissa didn't pull away, it grew more assured. "Thank you for trusting me," David murmured. Yulissa responded by closing the small gap between them, her hand squeezing his. "Thank you for being here." In that moment, something shifted. The friendship that had been forming was now laced with the potential for something deeper. They stood together in silence, the world around them a blur of colors and sounds, their shared warmth a stark contrast to the cool air. Finally, Yulissa spoke softly, "Let's go back inside. We shouldn't keep the others waiting." As they re-entered the warmth of Torvin's home, both felt a change. Neither knew what the future held, but for now, they knew they had each other's understanding and respect, a foundation strong enough to explore whatever might come next. The evening after the dinner at Torvin's place, David found himself walking alongside Yulissa towards a small observatory used primarily for educational purposes by the Xylarian community. The night was clear, a canvas of twinkling stars stretching endlessly above them. "Torvin mentioned this place last night, said it offers the best view of the galaxies," David said, his voice filled with anticipation. "It does," Yulissa agreed, her tone softer than usual. "And it's a good place for private conversations." They entered the observatory, and David immediately went to the large telescope, his eyes lighting up with childlike wonder. "This is incredible. Earth's observatories are great, but this is something else." Yulissa watched him with a smile, pleased to see him so engrossed. "Want to see something truly spectacular?" she asked, adjusting the telescope before guiding him to look through it. David peered into the eyepiece, and his breath caught. "That's amazing. What am I looking at?" "That's the nebula of Orus about 3,000 light-years away. It's a nursery for stars," Yulissa explained, her voice close to his ear, causing a shiver to run down his spine. "The birthplace of stars," David murmured, stepping back to let Yulissa have a look. Their hands brushed lightly, a spark of electricity seeming to pass between them. Feeling the tension, Yulissa suggested, "There's a small lounge area here. We could talk more comfortably." As they sat on the plush couches, the dim lighting of the observatory created an intimate atmosphere. David turned to Yulissa, his expression serious. "Yulissa, about the other night on the balcony. I've been thinking." Yulissa met his gaze, her heart quickening. "So have I." David took a deep breath. "I feel a connection with you, something I haven't felt in a long time. But I'm also aware of our differences. I don't want to complicate things for you." Yulissa nodded, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I feel it too, David. The connection. And yes, it's complicated. But ignoring it feels wrong somehow." Silence fell for a moment as they both contemplated the gravity of their feelings. Then, almost instinctively, David reached out, taking Yulissa's hand in his. She didn't pull away. "Maybe we don't need to decide anything right now," David suggested softly. "Maybe we can just explore these feelings, see where they lead us." "That sounds reasonable," Yulissa agreed, a smile breaking through her initial hesitation. Encouraged, David shifted closer, his other hand reaching up to gently caress her face. Yulissa closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. When she opened them again, David was watching her intently, his eyes full of emotion. "May I?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Yulissa nodded, and slowly, David leaned in. Their lips met in a soft, tentative kiss that lingered, both exploring the new terrain cautiously yet eagerly. As they pulled away, the air charged with a new energy, Yulissa whispered, "I didn't expect this." "Neither did I," David admitted, his thumb stroking her cheek. "But I'm not sorry it's happening." "Neither am I," Yulissa responded, her voice now steady with resolve. They spent the rest of the night talking, kissing, and learning about each other in a way that was both exhilarating and comforting. When it was time to leave, they did so together, hand in hand, the stars above witness to their burgeoning relationship. As they walked back, the phrase that once seemed so ominous now held a promise: alien sheriff captured a human, and her hot season began. It was no longer just about Yulissa's biological cycle, it was about the season of their lives beginning anew, together. The morning after their night at the observatory, David and Yulissa found themselves at a quaint Xylarian cafe near the command center, sharing a quiet breakfast. The mood was contemplative as they navigated the new dynamics of their relationship. David stirred his drink, then looked up at Yulissa. "I know we said we'd take things slowly, explore as we go. But I have this nagging feeling. Do you think what we're doing could impact your work, your position as sheriff?" Yulissa took a moment before answering, her gaze fixed on the swirling steam rising from her cup. "It's a valid concern. My role here isn't just a job, it's a duty to my people. I can't afford distractions." David nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I never want to be a reason you're compromised. Maybe we need to consider some boundaries, just to ensure both your professional integrity and our personal explorations." "That might be wise," Yulissa agreed, her expression softening. "But setting boundaries doesn't mean stepping back. It means stepping smartly." Smiling at her choice of words, David reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Stepping smartly it is, then." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Rael, who greeted them with a knowing smile. "Morning, you two. I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Yulissa assured him, pulling her hand back to herself a bit self-consciously. Rael sat down, his demeanor casual. "I came to discuss the next phase of the ecological project. We've made some interesting findings in the northern caverns that could use your expertise, David." David was eager to redirect his focus to work. "Absolutely, Rael. What have you found?" "We discovered some mineral deposits that aren't just rare, they're unlike anything we've cataloged before." "Your input could be invaluable," Rael explained, passing a digital tablet with data to David. As they delved into a technical discussion, Yulissa observed them, pleased to see the seamless integration of their professional and personal worlds. It was a delicate balance, but one they were managing well. Later, the trio walked back to the command center, discussing various aspects of the project. Yulissa felt a sense of pride and relief, her personal decisions hadn't clouded her professional judgment. Inside the command center, Torvin approached them with an update. "Sheriff, the Council is requesting an update on the interplanetary exchange program. They're particularly interested in how David's presence has influenced our operations." "Thank you, Torvin," Yulissa responded, turning to David with a reassuring look. "This might actually be a good opportunity to formalize your contributions here." David appreciated her proactive approach. "I'd be honored to help frame our collaboration in a way that benefits both Earth and Xylar." The remainder of the day was spent drafting a presentation for the Xylarian Council, outlining the scientific and cultural benefits of their ongoing exchange. David included a section on the potential for future partnerships, highlighting the mutual gains from their collaborative efforts. As the evening approached, Yulissa and David found themselves alone again, this time in her office. "Today felt like a step in the right direction," Yulissa commented, leaning back in her chair. "It did," David agreed, sitting across from her. "And personally, navigating this, it's made me realize how much I've come to value what we have." Yulissa smiled, her earlier reservations eased by their productive day. "I feel the same. Whatever challenges come, I believe we can handle them, as long as we're transparent and respectful of each other's roles." David stood, walking over to her side. "Then here's to stepping smartly, in every sense." Yulissa stood to meet him, and together, they looked out her office window at the setting sun, a symbol of another day's challenges met and opportunities embraced. As they turned to face each other, The promise of tomorrow was clear in their eyes, professional integrity intact, personal connection deepening. As the twin sons of Xylar began their ascent, casting a gentle golden glow over the landscape, David and Yelissa prepared to present their findings and the framework for ongoing collaboration to the Xylarian Council. They stood outside the council chambers, reviewing their notes one last time. "Are you ready for this?" David asked, looking over at Yelissa with a supportive smile. "As ready as I'll ever be," Yelissa replied, her voice steady but her nerves apparent. "This could shape not just my career but our future interactions with Earth." David nodded, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We've done the work, Yelissa. They'll see the value in it." They were called into the chamber, a spacious room with a high dome ceiling, where members of the Xylarian Council sat in a semicircle. The atmosphere was formal but not unfriendly. Yelissa began the presentation, explaining the initial purpose of David's visit and the unexpected benefits that had arisen from their cooperation. What started as a simple scientific expedition has blossomed into a full-fledged exchange of knowledge and resources. David then took over, detailing the scientific discoveries and proposing plans for further research collaborations. "The potential here is immense. Not only do we gain scientific insights, but we also forge a path towards greater understanding between our worlds." Council member Tharvin, a respected elder, leaned forward, intrigued. This partnership could serve as a model for future interplanetary relations. "What assurances do we have that Earth will respect our sovereignty and resources?" David responded earnestly, "We propose a structured exchange program, governed by protocols that ensure mutual respect and benefit. Every step will be transparent and jointly monitored." Another council member, Lysara, focused on Yelissa. "And what of your role, Sheriff? How do you balance these duties with your responsibilities here?" Yelissa answered confidently, "My commitment to Xylar remains unchanged. This partnership enhances our capabilities and enriches our understanding, which ultimately benefits our planet." The council deliberated briefly before council leader Zerk spoke. "We are inclined to approve this initiative. However, we will require regular updates and the right to halt any collaboration should it threaten our cultural or environmental integrity." "Understood," Yelissa agreed, a sense of relief washing over her as the council members nodded in agreement. As they left the chamber, David let out a long breath. "That went better than I expected." Yelissa laughed lightly. "You were fantastic. They saw your sincerity, that's what made the difference." With the council's tentative approval, they walked towards the observatory where their relationship had taken a pivotal turn. "It seems like everything is aligning," David remarked, gazing at the horizon where the morning light met the land. "Yes," Yelissa smiled, taking his hand. "It's a new dawn, in more ways than one." As they reached the observatory, Rael and Torvin were waiting to congratulate them. "We heard the news," Rael said, clapping David on the back. "Well done, both of you." Torvin added, "Looks like we're on the brink of something great." The group looked out over the fields of Xylar, the early light reflecting off the bioluminescent plants. It was a symbol of new beginnings and the promise of a shared future. David turned to Yelissa. "Whatever comes next, I'm grateful for this journey with you, with all of you." "And we with you," Yelissa replied, her voice full of hope. "Here's to the future, complex, challenging, but full of potential." As they watched the sunrise, the bonds they had formed, both personal and professional, felt unbreakable. A new chapter was beginning, not just for David and Yelissa, but for Earth and Xylar, a testament to the power of collaboration, understanding, and respect.